Hungry eyes watched the street that ran between the convenience store and the subdivision on the outskirts of Kearney Flats, Florida. It was run down, and plywood had replaced half the windows on the building, but it was looking great compared to most of the homes in the subdivision. On this day, the hungry eyes watched a thin man walking a funny-looking dog. The owner of the eyes drooled. He liked dogs. He followed the target stealthily behind a row of corn that paralleled the road. "Come on, Piefilling, do your business," said the man who led the portly dog to a patch of weeds. Now was the time. The hungry skunk ape stepped out of the cornfield and rushed the pet. As Piefilling was in the middle of his business, Martin saw the monster emerge from the cornfield. "Shit!" he said. Then he reached under his shirt and pulled out a .38 caliber revolver and fired 5 shots into the center of its hulking mass. It dropped like a pile of pig manure, which was what Piefilling was busy creating. Then Piefilling grunted, because Piefilling was no ordinary dog. In fact, he wasn't a dog at all. Piefilling was a pig. It was decided to use the noble Piefilling for bait because the skunk ape appeared to like dog more than anything else. The only dog left in town now was Janet Pilson's rare Matlock Terrier, and she needed that much to find her partial when she lost it, so there was no other bait available. So the townsfolk had gotten together and fixed up Piefilling to look as close to a dog as they could. First, they glued a bunch of hair on him. They got that hair from the police department from what they saved from shaving wandering hippies every season. And they made a tail with a piece of rope coated with glue and rolled in that same sad shaved hippie hair. After securely attaching the tail with more glue and maybe a staple or two, they did a similar treatment to his ears. It seems that with enough glue, enough determination, and enough shaved hippie hair, you can make a pig look kinda like a dog, especially if you've been drinking moonshine all day. Well, apparently it looked good enough to fool the skunk ape. Part of it, however, had to be credited to Piefilling for his magnificent acting, and the townsfolk were forever grateful. So grateful, in fact, that they had a dinner in his honor. Most of the town attended the barbecue, and the celebration they held to mark the killing of the skunk ape was magnificent. They burned the ape, as was the custom of the time, and held Piefilling in the highest regard, using every part of him but the squeal. Well, that and the head, and the hide, which was of no use because it was covered with glue and shaved hippie hair. The next morning, and pickled shark arrived as normal, but it may have seemed a little quieter than usual to some observers, as the liquor delivery driver made his usual stops. Inside the homes and apartments and burrows he passed, the usual morning sounds were replaced by choking, coughing, and splattery sounds of wetness plopping moistly into receptacles. Except for some houses. In some houses, the sound of flatulence reigned. Others were deathly quiet, where Piefilling's appreciation had been keenly digested the day before. Some say the innocent righteousness of Piefilling could not be contained by human beings who had used him so callously. Others say Piefilling was in league with the dead skunk ape and should have been burned with him. And others say it was a rare toxin common to Sumatran sandhog pygmy razor front hybrids, of which Piefilling was a specimen. Still others say it's the curse of Piefilling. whose ghost haunts the night. A glued blanket of pigskin and shaved hippie hair hanging off its floating skinless head, grunting plaintively in the night. Medical records and police reports from that weekend contain curious incidents, like 4 incidents of self-strangulation via prolapsed colons, which is at least 3 more than a usual Super Bowl Sunday weekend in the area. And all them people died mostly of dehydration and loss of bodily fluids. Many of the casualties were found days after the barbecue, but the common factor in each one of them was determined to be a bellyful of pie filling. By the time it was done, more than 400 citizens of Pickled Shark were deceased. Every year, so the legend of pie filling goes, you can see his ghostly head bobbing around the cornfields at dusk, with the foul-smelling glued-on hippie hair hide underneath, trailing a tail along the ground to leave a faint, dusty mark of its passing. Or you may find a jar of homemade head cheese by the side of the road near the cemetery where the victims of the barbecue are buried. No matter how good it smells, do not eat it. Do not use it in a recipe or as an addition to mountain oyster sandwiches that are so popular among the hill people of that area. So if one day you're visiting Pickled Shark, Florida, and you're walking past the Timex Cemetery, and you see a jar of yummy head cheese, just leave it be. Do not pull out a roll of white saltine crackers. Do not open that jar and smell that nasty head cheese. Do not put your finger in that gooey mess and lick it off. Don't do any of that. Just leave that head cheese alone. You can eat your mountain oyster sandwiches with shrimp cocktail sauce like God intended. You'll be all right that way.